So I'm at the Web at Quebec with Josh Clark. So would you like to introduce yourself first,
Sure,
for
yeah.
people that don't know you?
Right. Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm an interactive designer. I specialize particularly in mobile design, or maybe a better way to put it is multi-device design. How do you create interfaces and interactions with the whole range of form factors that we're working with now? I've been focused particularly on mobile and touchscreen design the last few years, although one of the interests and one of the things that I was talking about today is just a broader interest in starting to design for sensors. All of these sensors, whether that's audio or video or GPS or gyroscope or accelerometer, all the sort of superpowers that are packed into devices today, and not just in the devices that we carry, but out in the world around us as sensors become embedded in the physical world. So that's sort of a big area of interest for me. I have my own small agency, Global Moxie, where I do design work for clients, but I also do a lot of speaking and writing, and I wrote a book called Tapworthy about iPhone design.
Awesome. So we're going to talk a little more about Tapworthy. So the talk you did this morning was about the future, but it was also about the future that is now. Let me tell you, I'm living and breathing around technology. I love gadgets. I love all these applications. What people are doing with mobiles, natural interface, all these things. And I was pretty amazed with all the examples that you showed us today. So it's amazing where we are with technology, and I would like to ask you, where do you see the technology in the future? What's going to be the newest things that will happier soon? What's going to be the things that the cool kids going to use soon? Do you have any idea where is it going?
Yeah. I think when we imagine the future, we sort of see the Enterprise future of the Star Trek, really sort of crazy embedded technology. That too, that works too. But I guess what I mean when I talk about sort of Star Trek is that very sort of clean, pristine. If it's Star Wars, it's the Empire version of Star Wars, right? This sort of clean, pristine, ever more sophisticated technology. And I think that actually, the more that I think about it, the more the technology is likely to be cooked into sort of dumber devices, and that will make these incremental improvements by connecting a lot of things. So we talk a lot about the Internet of Things these days, and the idea there is, on the one hand, we've got our interfaces, our digital interfaces are becoming more physical, that we're sort of painting interfaces onto these physical objects that we carry around now, and it's almost like we have this industrial design practice. On the other hand, we've got the physical world becoming more digital, that we're able to communicate and interact with the physical world in new ways as we have objects that are reporting, sort of their status, whether they're sort of little appliances or little pills that you take that in order to track, sort of compliance, whether you're actually taking pills. They actually have this little thing, this little grain of sand. It's about as big as that you can put into a medical pill that is, it's got the same stuff in it as a vitamin. It's got like magnesium and copper essentially, but then when it hits your stomach acid, it turns it into a battery and a transmitter, and that it transmits out just a little bit of data that says, here's the pill that was taken, and sort of like, take a timestamp of this, so that doctors can tell whether, for example, patients with dementia are taking their pills. So this idea that, wow, we can have sensors and communication sort of throughout the world, I think throughout the world around us is exciting, and I think means that we are going to have the opportunity to interact less with the screen in front of us, which I think is a very powerful and persistent notion of what it means to do computing, is to interact with a screen, look at it, touch it, click around with it, whatever. I think that the exciting thing about designing for sensors is that we're able to push the interface out into the world around us and start to interact with machines that happen to be nearby, either by speech or by gesture, in ways that seem very natural, that we'll be able to start to communicate with machines in ways that more resemble the way that we communicate with humans. Right now we communicate with the machines on their level, and that's gotten better. It used to be command line where we had to literally write like the machines. And, it's gotten more and more humane, but I think that with sensors, as we're able to sort of make the device be incidental to the actual interaction that we have, and the interaction becomes invisible and moves out into our natural world that is sort of exciting. And I think we see things like technologies like Google Glass, for example, that starts to make it so that we can sort of interact more naturally with the world and get just a little bit, I don't know, peripheral vision, some information about what's happening. I think one thing that's actually interesting about Google Glasses is not actually necessarily the glasses part, but the earpiece part, because what there is like a little, it's actually on the microphone is actually, or the speaker is actually not a speaker, but it's something that sort of transmits through your skull vibration. And so it can sit above your ear. You don't have to put anything in your ear to wear these things. And it sounds great. It's just sort of like it's this thing that transmits through your skull. So it's these things that, again, technology becomes less and less invasive or distracting, that we don't have to always have our heads down in the screens, that we can interact one another or with the world around us.
That is amazing. I can't wait to see what people's going to come with, what people's going to build, what developers going to create around all these new technologies. It's pretty amazing. You're all about design. You wrote a book, Tapworthy. You said it before. It's mostly around iPhone development, how to do a great mobile experience. Platform agnostic, like just around mobile. Yeah. For you, what is a great mobile experience? When the developer or a designer needs to create a mobile application, whether it's native application, whether it's a web application, what would be a great mobile experience for you?
Yeah. One is, I would say, a complete experience. So just right off the top of the bat, I think that there's often a tendency to think that mobile should be less or a companion version to a to the real computing experience on the desktop. And I think that part of that is a little bit of laziness on our part, that it's hard to put a complex experience into the small screen. It takes real work and thought, and I think that you need to do that because the truth is that for a lot of people, it's not a companion experience anymore. In the US, for example, we're seeing something like around 36 million people in the US access the web pretty much only through the mobile phone. So that's the only way that they're going to see your website or your application. And so if you care about those people, and you should be serving your complete content and functionality to everyone. The other bit is, I'll sort of say is, that said, there are sort of three reasons that we tend to pick up our phone and launch it. And one is what I would call microtasking, sort of a mindset where we want to do something really quickly. So it's the idea of really identifying what are the one or two primary tasks that I'm constantly returning to for this, and optimize for that. Just make it super easy, reduce the number of taps, make it really easy to do this one thing with your thumb super quickly. Very, sort of quick, streamlined flows. The other thing is sort of I'm local, which is sort of what I've been talking about with sensors. It's what's around me, or often what's in front of me. How can I interact with the world around me? What can I do to push sensors in some really interesting way? And again, we tend to think about this, and sort of this label I've given it, I'm local, reinforces that, which maybe is unfortunate, but that it's a GPS-based thing. It will show me a map of what's around me. But we're seeing, some interesting things. For example, with WordLens, one of the example apps that I showed today, where you just point the camera, and so an augmented reality app, point the camera at text in one language, and it translates it in real time, no internet connection required. And on the screen, you see the text in a different language. So you're pointing it at something, and it actually translates the text, and it moves around. It's like it's live video, but same font, same color. Just the text is in a different language. What's right in front of me? And then finally, I'm bored. Which is sort of the opposite of that microtasking thing. What can I give people to explore and to spend time and engage? So I think people often think that mobile is about hurrying people through, and that's part of it. We do use it to wedge between activities. But I think it's also, wow, I spend, a 3-hour layover at the airport, or I'm on the couch, or, I'm on the bus going to work. I got nothing to do. Give me something to do. So giving people information, data, and experience to explore is an important piece.
Yep. I really think that people should consider doing mobile application, or at least mobile experience, like you said, not an afterthought, but really part of what they're trying to achieve, because it's so important. For now, everybody's got a mobile phone. Yeah. Talking about mobile, you also wrote a chapter in the latest Smashing magazine book. it's all about touch. And sometimes I'm mostly talking to developer. I'm a developer also, and we tend to create stuff for computer that touch it's still new. So we try to create things for desktop or not really for touch devices. And you see sometimes that those really great application and the features are amazing. It's really like filling one of my needs. It's working around those three things that you said before. But the touch experience, it's not quite there. So at the end, the experience for me as a user, it's really bad. What would be for you like developing or designing for a touch device? There is some base principle around this. What would be those principles for you?
I think you're really getting at it. It's just that this idea that we tend to think of our discipline as an exercise in visual design, and historically it has been visual and information design. But when you introduce touch, you're actually designing this physical object. I mentioned that earlier, that digital is becoming more physical, and you're presented with this blank slate, a phone or a tablet, or as Microsoft calls it, a slate, where you're actually just, it is waiting for you to impose your own interface on it. And because that interface requires hands and fingers to interact with it, it is inherently a physical interaction. So you're not just a visual designer anymore, you're an industrial designer. And so you have to think about where hands and fingers come to rest on the device that you're designing for. And that is different for the phone, where you want to sort of optimize for sort of bottom of the screen kind of experiences, because that's access to where your thumb is. About 50% of the time, it turns out, we're using just our thumb versus the other couple of grips that we can have. For tablets, we're generally holding it sort of on the side, around halfway up the screen. And what's the new wrinkle, I think, is that now I think we have to design desktop experiences
It's not just
for
about
touch.
smartphone anymore.
That's right. I mean, it used to be, right? It was sort of like, oh, phones have this, and then as the technology got less expensive, we could put it onto tablets, and now onto ultrabooks and laptops, and perhaps desktops. We'll see. Windows 8 has certainly pushed this trend, so that now we have about 40 hybrid devices that have some sort of keyboard and screen combination. And so we're getting into this case where we have to think about what are the ergonomics of that device, and it turns out sort of bottom corners are sort of where you rest your arms, and so you use your thumbs in those areas. How do you optimize for that? And it's not necessarily your main navigation. If in like a web context, for example, just because your thumbs are happening to be there, you don't necessarily put your main navigation there, because you want to put something there that people actually use, and it turns out that main navigation is not actually that, so main navigation is the miserable last resort if you can't find your stuff sort of in the main canvas of the content. But so I think it's thinking about physically paying real attention to where fingers and thumbs come to rest is perhaps the biggest thing to think about when you're designing for touch. And also to realize that screen size is a terrible predictor of the presence of a touch screen. But that's exactly how we've been dealing with it in responsive design. And I don't mean to overburden responsive design. That is strictly a visual, that attacks a visual problem, that we have different screen sizes. But we've been using it to sort of do double duty to detect whether it's a touch screen or not, essentially.
Yeah.
Oh, if it's small, it's touch. If it's big, it's not. And that's been a problem, in a sense, for larger tablets like the iPad, where you load it up and say, oh, it looks pretty good, the desktop version, I'm done. Except that it has very unfriendly touch targets. The default select menu is small. It's hard to work with a finger. You have small, tiny text, hover conditions to get at required information. All those are very hostile to touch. And so understanding that, wow, just because it's wide doesn't mean we have a fine pointer changes things. The Windows 8 environment, they have this notion of a pointer, of what kind of pointer am I dealing with here? Is this a cursor or a finger, a fine or a coarse pointer? And that's something that is being suggested for CSS4, that we can get a media query to ask for that. But even then, it's not clear what to do, because, well, Microsoft Surface has touch and a trackpad. What's the right thing for it to report? How does it know when I'm feeling like touching my screen versus feeling like using a fine cursor? So some big problems there, and I think that my thought, especially for the web, is if it could be touch, but you can't determine whether it is or not, you have to design it for touch, because cursor will work with a cursor will work with a touch screen, but the finger won't work with a with an interface designed for cursor.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that I'm saying to people usually is that I think that now you should always design for touch, because like you said, when you're going to go with the mouse, it's going to work. And what I really like is that when you usually design for touch, there's a couple of things in the design process that is like, usually it's going to be more clean, it's going to be more simple. Sometimes it's going to be the interface is going to breathe. You're going to do a little more content before Chromes. So at the end, it's going to be also a good experience for people that are on their desktop with no touchscreen and going with the mouse. Yeah. So no, I really think that people should design for touch now. So thanks for your time.
Hey,
we can follow you on Twitter on Global Moxie.
Global Moxie.
Same things for your blog.
That's it. GlobalMoxie.com.
Awesome. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you enjoy your time in Quebec City.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks.
Take care.